Has this ever happened to you? You look through the battle pass and then you realize that there's obviously the free version that everyone gets, but there's also a Gnostic hymn that you can pay for as well. And then when you reach level 30 of the battle pass, you realize there's a BP bounty that you can select a choice out of 10 weapons, and then you think to yourself, what do I choose? And so this video is to really help you to decide which weapon is best for your account. Now obviously, I don't want to preface this. If you're like a free-to-play, you don't buy the web battle pass, stuff like that, don't feel forced, but maybe you decide to once in a while, delve into the battle pass because you're feeling a little bit lucky, you got a little bit more money, you got a job that pays you well, for example, or you struck a goal with the lottery, stuff like that. You decide to splurge a little bit into the battle pass, which is a good, one of the better things to probably spend in this game, right? Obviously, but yeah. So out of these 10 weapons, which is the best, right? That's what this video is going to help you with. I'm just going to say, obviously, there are some weapons that are probably better. For example, the spoiler alert, the Claymore, the Serpent Spine is a very good weapon. But if you don't use Claymore characters, what good is the Serpent Spine for you? And it's not really like a tier list to say like, oh, this is number 1 you should get, number 2 you should get. But just to see like which weapon suits your playstyle, suits your characters, suits your rosters, and then you make your decision from there. So without further ado, without much blabbering, let's just begin. Right, so now let's talk about the sword options first, and I think that both options are actually pretty good, the Wolf-Fang and the Black Sword. Let's talk about the older one first because let's give respect to our elders. Alright, the Black Sword. Now both weapons have the same base attack and crit rate at level 90, which is 510 and 27.6, but as you can see, the Black Sword benefits characters that use their normal and charged attacks. At refinement 1, you get a 20% increase in damage, whereas at refinement 5, it is up to 40%. The second part, the passive about the health regeneration, not really that crazy in this day and age. We've gotten much better healers since 1.0. It doesn't really matter, but it can be a nice bonus if you have like the Marechaussee Hunter on your character to proc the 4-piece effect more easily. And also for Farina Havers, you have Farina in your team, it does help to stack the fanfare stacks a little bit quicker as well. That being said, it's not really the main selling point. The biggest selling point is the normal and charged attack damage increase. And so if you have characters like Al-Haytham, Skirk, Kaching, even Cloran can use it, right? All these characters that use the normal attacks to deal damage, they can receive quite a substantial boost. On the other hand, the Wolf-Fang, right, does benefit characters that rely on the elemental skill and burst a lot more. So first and foremost, the skill and burst damage gets increased from 16% at R1 to 32% at R5. But at the same time, it does also increase the crit rate of the skill and the burst individually. Now, both these stat counters are separate. So, if you reduce your skill, you don't get the additional crit rate for your burst and vice versa. But basically a max of 4 stacks. And each time your skill or your burst hits an opponent, you get 2% crit rate. So at a maximum of 8 for R1. And then at R5 is 4%. So it is 16% crit rate individually for both abilities. So we can see that the Wolf-Fang does benefit more characters because I think more characters for sword characters make use of the skill and burst a lot more. Obviously, your characters like Al-Haytham can use both, right? So they benefit from both weapons. And then you can see that other characters like Farina, Xingqiu, they can also benefit from the Wolf-Fang because of the reliance on their skill and burst for damage. And so generally, I think both weapons are pretty decent. I do think the Wolf-Fang does edge it out quite a bit because it does cover more characters. That being said, Black Sword's still a good option, especially if you have characters that use normal attacks. So in my opinion, like if the Wolf-Fang is like an A-, the Black Sword is like a B+. They're very close, there's slight differences, and ultimately it depends on like which type of characters you use. Alright, so let's now talk about the bows. Let's talk about the Viridescent Hunt. Now this, same as the two swords, base attack of 510 and a crit rate of 27.6. Now this is a very finicky weapon. I think this was a lot better when like Chow was the meta kind of thing. But basic, what happens is that when you use normal and charge attacks, you basically have a 50% chance to create a cyclone, a mini vortex. It doesn't even swirl, right, if I remember correctly. And this does 40% of your attack as damage, which at R5 it is 100%, so it's a decent chunk, but the effect happens very it takes a long while. At R1 it is every 14 seconds, whereas I believe at R5 it is every 10 seconds. Oh, by the way, I'm a little bit wrong. This is 80%, not 100%. Alright, so R5 is 80% of your attack. So it can be pretty decent for small mobs in the Abyss. It can help with grouping, but there are a few characters in the game that use their basic attacks or even their charge attacks. Obviously, this can be helpful for characters like Tighnari, but for characters that use their charge shots, they are usually more like single target focus. Obviously, Ganyu can be like multi-hit and stuff like that. But for characters like Tighnari, for characters like Lini, they do excel at single target a lot more, and so they generally benefit a lot more from the for other weapons, right? They don't really benefit that much. Obviously, this is a match made in heaven for Chow mains, because not only do you kind of use your melee attacks, but the melee attacks also create the cyclone, which kind of groups the enemies together. But other than that niche, it can be a little bit like it's more of a niche thing, right? It's not something that you activate very often. That being said, still a pretty nice stat stake nonetheless. Alright, so let's talk about the other weapon, the Scion of the Blazing Sun. It is a very good weapon for single target damage. Basically, after using a charge attack, a Sunfire arrow will hit the enemy and will put a debuff. Alright, this debuff called the Heart Searer can be 28%, the enemies take 28% more charge attack damage, or 56% at refinement level 5. This lasts for 10 seconds, which is also the amount of time that it takes to trigger every Sunfire arrow. And so you're basically just doing more damage for characters that are very reliant on their charge attacks. Your Tignaris, your Ganyus, your Linis, even your Childs also benefit quite a lot from this weapon. And so in this case, you can see that regarding these two weapons, the Viridescent tends to gravitate towards like AoE content, whereas the Scion retargets to a single target. In my opinion, I think the Scion is slightly better because obviously, in the Abyss, especially at floor 12, not really that crazy, but it can be very helpful, especially if like the content like in floor 11 kind of like has like multiple mobs. It can be very helpful. It's a 50% chance, which is obviously like, winning the 50-50. But that being said, it can be pretty decent in that content. But in general, I prefer the Scion of Blazing Sun, but they're both just pretty okay weapons nonetheless. There are pretty decent options or alternatives for these characters. For example, the Rust is very good on characters like Child, whereas for characters like Tighnari or even Ganyu, right, there are other options that are pretty decent. Any EM bows can work pretty well. You also have the option of like, ironically, a 3-star weapon called the Slingshot, which does pretty nice as well. So like for the bows in general, not really the craziest. I think they are both like pretty B minus weapons all around, but it is nice to have if you do have them lying, and if maybe want to pull for some more weapons, or you have like a lot of bow characters, they can be pretty decent. I would say that if you have more like charge attack characters like Linis or Tignaris and stuff like that, then maybe the Scion of the Blazing Sun may be a little bit more worth it to you. But overall, I think the two bows are just like very middle of the road. Alright, so let's talk about Claymores next. And when we talk about Claymores, we know who is the undisputed GOAT among the Battle Pass weapons, the Serpent Spine. Right, so Serpent Spine, 510, 27.6 is pretty standard among a lot of the weapons, but the passive is what takes it to the next level. So every 4 seconds, the characters on the field, basically they will deal more damage, but also receive more damage, right? These stacks of damage can be up to 5 stacks, and they will not be reset if they leave the field, so it can be pretty decent for all field characters, but will be reduced by 1 if they take damage. But obviously, you can put up a shield in like, dodge kind of thing to prevent you from losing these stacks. But it is like at R1, it is 30% more damage that you can deal, and at R5, it is basically 50% more damage. This is a weapon that puts the Wolf's Gravestone out of commission, everyone. All 5-star Claymores are judged against the Serpent Spine. right? That is how powerful the Serpent Spine is. Now, obviously, people will say like, oh, it takes a very long time to get these 6 stacks in Abyss. You know, you have to wait for like 20 seconds and just wait for 20 seconds, go and get a book, go into the toilet, stuff like that, right? But the Serpent Spine, undoubtedly one of the best, if not the best weapon in the battle pass. Crazy amount of damage, right? And in fact, at high refinements, the damage taken, right, actually reduces. At R5 is actually 2%. And obviously, any Claymore character that does damage will benefit from this weapon, right? I can't think of any character besides maybe like the EM like reaction characters, or like for example like Beidou in like a Hyperbloom comp, for example, that would not benefit from this at all. Like almost like Malwika benefits from this. Navia, Ito, all these characters benefit. Heck, Eula can benefit from this. So yeah, Jenny, a pretty good weapon all around. If you have 1 or 2 Claymore characters but you have not put their signature weapons, their 5-star, definitely an impressive weapon to have in your roster. Now, unfortunately, I do not have this weapon in my arsenal, but we're talking about the new weapon for the Claymore, the Talking Stick, and because of how good the Serpent Spine is, I guess the Talking Stick is just as strong. Well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, it is not. Let me just zoom this in a little bit. So basically, 565, 18.4, so same thing as the Scion on the Blazing Sun. Right, but if we look at the passive, you start to see that the main problem with this weapon. The passive for the Talking Stick is that your attack will increase by 60% for 15 seconds after being affected by Pyro. Also, you know, you need to have elements onto yourself. And then all elemental damage bonus will increase if you're affected by Hydro, Cryo, Electro, or Dendro. So you can kind of see that the activation for this can be a little bit iffy. Obviously, the Pyro one, everyone knows it is the using Bennett, right? Using Bennett will trigger this. So yeah, if you don't have Bennett, you're kind of screwed, right? Obviously, you won't be able to get this. And then if you want to get the damage bonus, you have to inflict yourself with Dendro, Cryo, Electro. So it can be decent on a character like Razor, who puts like Electro on himself or on the team. But yeah, it's just a very weird like activation clause. Now obviously if you're able to activate it, this can be a pretty decent weapon, but it is not something that's like consistent among characters, among your roster. So obviously I don't think this is a very good weapon. It does give you a good bonus if you activate it, but the conditions to activate this is like very, very specific. And I don't think this is an overall good thing for like many people's roster unless you are you're very specifically catering your account towards the Talking Stick passives. So generally, if you're talking about like I don't really compare like weapons to weapons, but if you're talking about like Claymores in particular, hey, go for the Serpent Spine, don't look back. Right? That is my only thing I would say. Don't look back. Serpent Spine, Serpent Spine, Serpent, bah. Say that 10 times fast. All right, so now let's talk about the catalysts. So first and foremost, we have the Granddaddy, the Solar Pole, the old 1.0 weapon. Same base stat as like the other 1.0, where it is 510 attack and also 27.6 crit rate. Now the passive is that when you use your normal attacks, your skill and your burst will then have increased damage. And the opposite is also true. When you use your burst or skill, your normal attack will also get the damage increase. It is 20% at R1 and 40% at R5. And obviously this can be decent for characters that are like sub DPSs or even main DPSs as well. It can be a little bit like odd to like play around. It is slightly easier to activate on sub DPS characters that make use of their skill and their burst, because obviously you just need to do one normal attack, which you can just do for free, and then you get the benefits from your skill and burst. Whereas for main DPSs that use like their basic attacks, you have to use a skill which has a cooldown, your burst also has a cooldown, and the energy requirements. It can be a little bit iffy to activate. You do get a big benefit from it, but generally there are better options. In fact, like even if like by just playing the game passively, you may have gotten a copy of the Witsith, and while it has a crit damage stat, right, it is like pretty good, where in most cases, most characters, if not I would say all characters, benefit from at least 2 of these benefits. Whereas like some characters that actually benefit from all 3. So generally, you know, like they're pretty decent side grades or even like upgrades, even in the 4-star category. And so like the Solar Pole really that does fall short, because we actually do have very good catalysts in the game. Alright, so talking about good catalysts, let's talk about the other weapon, the Sacrificial Jade, the new kid on the block. Low base attack but very high crit rate, and you see from the passive it's actually very good on HP scaling characters. Now basically, if you're off field for 5 seconds, you will get an increase of max HP by 32%, and it's actually 64% at R5 by the way, so if you're a Nivelet, you are winning. All right, and then the elemental mastery will also be increased by 40 and will be 80 if you have a refinement level 5. And once you're on field, these effects will be cancelled after the ruler has been on field for 10 seconds. So obviously, these characters they can't really spend a lot of time on field because they lose their benefits. But for characters like Nivelet, it is a crazy high increase in like stats, especially if, for example, you're playing like a vaporize Nivelet, for example. It can be pretty good. It can be good on Mualani as well, although I'll say like Mualani does 100% overcap because Obsidian Codex already gives 40% free crit rate, and I believe she ascends with crit rate anyways, so I think she's like going to overcap like very, very easily anyways. So hopefully you roll all into crit damage. But anyways, yeah, it is pretty good weapon, obviously for HP scaling characters, and also for even like supports and sub DPSs, because you can just like go in, use your abilities and bounce. So that can be pretty good. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of good HP scaling catalyst users that are sub DPSs, but that being said, it can be a pretty decent option even for the raw damage potential for characters like Nivelet and Mualani. And I think that if you have these two characters, if you don't have their signature weapons, I think this is a very good consideration. I would say that they also have very good craftable options in like Prototype Ember, and also the Ring of, I forgot the name, but it's the Netland craftable. So yeah, they are very good free-to-play options, so it's not really a must. It's like a decent weapon if you really want to spend and splurge, and it can be their second or third best weapon after their signature. But that being said, Sacrificial Jade not really that important, but it can be a crazy increase to your DPS capabilities. Now, but last but not least, I have no idea why my Arcano is using a Beginner's Protector. I have no idea why this is happening. But basically, we have the Deathmatch. Now, my Deathmatch is R5. It's a little bit unrelatable, but let's talk about the R1 Deathmatch, all right? The R1 Deathmatch is 400. So, Deathmatch stats 454, 36.8, same as the Sacrificial Jade. But basically, this is a weapon that changes depending if you are facing more than one enemy or just a singular target. If there's two or more, you have an attack increase of 16% for both attack and defense, which goes up to, well, I have the weapon here, to 32% at R5. And then, which is basically like a double, right? And then if you have only one enemy, it is 24 all the way up to 48%. So all we can see, just very good stats all around. It is a pretty decent weapon for both main DPS and sub DPS characters. But I would say that generally, if your character is a sub DPS, especially when it's very burst reliant, like Xiangling for example, generally the catch is a lot better than not only the Deathmatch, but the other Battle Pass Polearm as well. So something for players to take note. That being said, can be very good on a lot of characters, can be good obviously on Arlecchino, can be good on what's his name, the short guy, Scion, yeah, very good on Scion as well. It can just be a pretty good decent options for most Polearm characters. There's also a very great direction for sub DPS characters, where basically if let's say you are facing one enemy, which means that you get the like high, let's say like you get 48% attack bonus, and you switch out, you actually still keep the 48%, even if the next wave spawns in with like two enemies, you actually still keep the max attack buff. But that, as I mentioned, most of these characters generally will prefer the catch because it is just a lot better damage for them. And so last but not least, let's talk about the other Battle Pass Polearm, the Ballad of the Fjords, 510 to 27.6% crit rate, very, very standard. And basically you get free to 120 elemental mastery if you have at least 3 different elemental types in your party. So obviously for certain characters, this can be a very good thing. So for example, a character like Scion, who usually plays into Hyperbloom as his best team, benefits a lot because obviously he also appreciates the elemental mastery as well, especially if you do not have his signature weapon. So obviously good thing. And even like characters like Arlecchino and Hu Tao, right? You play them in like Vape or even Melt teams. You generally will also want like a character like Shilonen or Kazuha as well to also help with reactions for like the swirls and stuff like that. And so this can be a pretty good weapon for these characters as well. It's a lot of stats overall, helps balance the stats a little bit nicer. Obviously, you know, with characters that are relying on reactions, they also want EM. So this is a free way of getting EM just by meeting the party requirements. And so I would say like consider this if you have characters like Scion or Alikino or Hutao. That being said, yeah, it's just a pretty good weapon. It's definitely gotten better with time, and because of the way the passive is, where you have 3 different elemental types, it will definitely get a lot more worth it as the years go on. So in future, like when we go into Notcry, we definitely will start to see more impact, the Genshin Impact, for these types of weapons. And that's really all I have to say about the Battle Pass weapons, very summarized. But that being said, I think that there are some very clear standouts. Obviously, you know, Serpent Spine, Serpent Spine, Serpent Spine. But depending on your roster, right, you may see that the Deathmatch is actually a pretty good all-rounder. The Ballad of the Fjords can be pretty good on specific characters if you have them. Don't choose the Talking Stick, please. Both swords are pretty good. With the Wolf-Fang being slightly better, but I wouldn't knock the Black Sword down. These catalysts, the Sacrificial Jade can be a lot better if you have Nivelet or Moalani, and can be pretty like not that worthy otherwise. The Solar Pearl is decent, but can be a little bit hard to manage. And then when it comes to the bows, I think both of the bows are pretty mid, but the Blazing Sun, the Scion of the Blazing Sun is slightly better. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that I'm overselling the Serpent Spine? And do you think that the Talking Stick is the best weapon in the game? Let me know in the comments down below, because I would like to talk about it. All right. So yeah, basically that's that. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the Battle Pass weapons. I'll try to make this as brief as possible, but trying to include as much as I can, but not sound like I'm yapping too much. Anyways, hope you guys enjoy your day. Hope you guys have fun. Hope you guys take care of yourselves. Like I mentioned, like, share, comment, subscribe, all the good YouTube stuff. I stream live on Twitch, link in the description below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, yeah, stay healthy, stay safe, be good to yourselves and the people around you. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.